Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? Today, we're going to tell you our NFL Dark Horse MVPs. Some of these names are going to surprise you guys, but joining me like always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Hey, Brad, here we are back again, getting you through these dog days of the NFL summer, and we're going to get you through it. We're here to help you. Lay on the couch and listen up.
I like it, man. I like it. Wherever you are or however you may be listening, as Colin Cowherd likes to say, we appreciate each and every one of you guys, PGF Nation. Thanks for always checking out the show, the newsletter, the YouTube channel. We love you guys. Dark Horse MVPs, Alex. We've got some good ones here. We've got some names, like I said, that might surprise some people. Why don't you kick this off, Alex? Who's your first Dark Horse MVP for the NFL this season?
Well, I'll tell you mine immediately. I don't want to say it's going to come as a surprise to some people, but it's a very familiar name, and he has already 4. But it's Aaron Rodgers. Yes, I know it's like, oh, you don't think that's a dark horse, but right now Aaron Rodgers is the 11th favorite to win the MVP based on about 4 books that we looked at. So that's a dark horse to me. He's sitting outside the top 5, and more importantly, he's sitting outside the top 10. And what I see here, based upon how the Jets have constructed this team, they have fixed and not only fixed the offensive line, they've fortified it, getting Tyron Smith and then drafting Olu Fashanu. So that offensive line on paper looks like it should be set up. I would actually say they tripled down on the running back. So we know what they're going to do early on in that season with Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis. But they went out and got Mike Williams. We already know what Garrett Wilson is. And one of our dark horses, I always encourage people to go back and listen. But Malachi Corley, Brad has been very high on Malachi Corley in the slot. With an offense like that, with a running game with offensive weapons like that, and with an offensive line like that, Aaron Rodgers is due to get back to his MVP form.
Yeah, I like this one, Alex. You're right, because somehow the former MVP is really not being looked at as one of the MVP favorites. Like you said, 11th at most sports books as far as the odds to win MVP. So he absolutely is a dark horse here. The Jets are not getting the same buzz they did last year. And maybe it's because it's year 2 with Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's because Aaron Rodgers is a year older, coming off of the injury. But to your point, Alex, they did a really nice job this offseason. Joe Douglas did a really nice job in the draft. They did a really nice job in free agency, and they really upgraded a lot of key spots on this team. To your point, with the running game and the defense, the 2 things that are every quarterback's best friend, they're going to have both of those. And that could mean the Jets winning a lot of games this year. And if Aaron Rodgers plays at a high enough level and they're winning a lot of games, we know what that means. That's the kind of formula for an MVP season. So I love that pick, Alex. Absolutely. I'll tell you my first dark horse MVP, Alex, that I've got. How about Jared Goff coming off of a career year last season? Offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is back in Detroit after he was maybe the most coveted head coaching candidate out there last season. Him coming back, I think, is huge for this team. I think it's huge for the continuity, and I think it's huge for Jared Goff. He plays behind the best offensive line in the NFL. Sam Laporta was a breakout star rookie last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown has become one of the best all-around wide receivers in the game. They have a balanced attack with the running game. Now, look, we know the Lions, they made it to the NFC Championship game last year. If Goff puts up a good season, or I should say as good of a season, let's say the Lions get the 1 seed in the NFC, which I think is absolutely possible, I could see that formula making him a legit MVP candidate.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And here's the thing, like you said, Jared Goff, this team has now doubled down. They believe in him. They've doubled down by giving him a raise this year. So I think he feels very comfortable. We already know if they don't already have the top offensive line, they are definitely top 3 for the most part. And you already alluded to the running game with Montgomery and Gibbs. I think a key thing that will really help Jared Goff and what you're saying come true is Jameson Williams. Now, I don't believe in Jameson Williams. However, for the sake of this conversation, if he decides to show up, I think we definitely could be talking about Jared Goff resurrecting his career, because it looked like it was done being sent to the black hole at that point in time of the NFL, which was Detroit. This team is now in the right direction. They have proven that they belong. I mean, they did take San Francisco to the brink. They looked great in that first half, so they know they're coming back fully intact, offensive line fully intact, adding pieces. We know what they did with their defense, so the defense is even going to help him indirectly, could boost him and push him up to be an MVP. I definitely like Jared Goff here as well. Now, here's another name that people are going to laugh at because they don't believe he can play in prime time. Mr. Kirk Cousins. I'll pause there for the laughter. Yes, I did say Kirk Cousins. Now, we can talk about Kirk Cousins and we can say all the hee-haws and hoo-haws about what we feel about him as a quarterback in this league, but let's be honest and take a look at Kirk Cousins. What he's done since he's been in Minnesota, been very consistent. Now you take him and you put him in Atlanta. One of the better offensive lines, I would say top 10 if I'm not mistaken from what I saw from PFF. We know what that running back room looks like in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Now let's talk about those weapons. He gets Drake London, he gets Kyle Pitts, and then they also fortified their weapons with Darnell Mooney and Rondell Moore. So I think he's poised to do what he's always done when he was in Washington, when he got better in Minnesota. There's not much that this guy has not seen. And then now you bring in the Zach Robinson as offensive coordinator with new head coach Raheem Morris. He's going to be in a similar system that he's accustomed to looking at. Zach Robinson comes from the Sean McVay system, who comes from the Kyle Shanahan system, who comes from the Mike Shanahan system. Draw the line however you want to. And I think he's going to, I believe 1,000% he's going to do enough to stave off Michael Penix and keep this team in contention with him at the helm, and really finally unlock, even though Kyle Pitts has been decent, but unlock Kyle Pitts, unlock Drake London, who, let's think about Drake London. Drake London was the top wide receiver in that draft, and he has not looked like his other draft counterparts, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and so on. He has not looked like the top wide receiver draft pick in that draft. I think he's going to unlock both of these guys. I think Bijan Robinson is going to get to 1,000 plus yards, and Kirk Cousins is going to be poised for another 30 to 35, 4,500 yard, maybe 10 to 12 interception, 68% season, and have Atlanta win that division.
Yeah, I think Kirk Cousins is a great dark horse MVP candidate for all the reasons you just said, because he's got all those young weapons just waiting to be unlocked, as you termed it. I think it's a great way to put it. And I think Raheem Morris is going to upgrade this team on the defensive side of the ball especially, but I think his leadership is going to help bring this team an identity, something that they've really lacked in recent years. I think that division is wide open, and I think they have as much talent as anybody and have just as good a chance as anybody to maybe win double-digit games, maybe better, and really be in the mix to have a good playoff seeding. Wins plus stats equals MVP formula. And I think both of those things are possible here with Atlanta. My next dark horse MVP is out west, and it's Justin Herbert. Look, last year was a tough season for the Chargers. They finally pulled the plug on the Brandon Staley experiment, probably too late. I mean, they should have done it the year earlier, but that's a different story. Despite dealing with the terrible coaching, injuries to key players, poor play from really the rest of this offense, Herbert in 13 games actually posted similar numbers to his past seasons, and he had a quarterback rating of 93.2. So it's not like he was terrible, even though it was kind of being viewed that way. It's just everything around him seemed to really erode. Now you bring in Jim Harbaugh, and this is a guy that I've said on recent episodes when we did our top 10 coaching rankings. I talked about Jim Harbaugh, talked about what kind of coach he is and how much respect I have for him as a builder of teams. I think he can completely change the trajectory of this franchise. And I think Herbert has been a guy, I think he's always shown the talent to really play at a high level, but I expect this team to come in and really fortify a new identity with Harbaugh. They're going to run the ball more. They're going to play better defense. And I think it's going to put Herbert in better situations to have success in the win-loss column. look, he's always been a guy that's had good stats and a guy who's, like I said, always had a lot of talent. It's been the wins that haven't been at a high enough level for him to get that recognition. I think it starts this year. And I think if Herbert's numbers are good once again, he's been pretty consistent. Like I said, even in a down year, he put up good numbers. But if they're winning games and all of a sudden they're in the mix in the AFC, I think he could be a dark horse MVP, Alex.
When we look at this team on paper, they don't have the weapons that they have that would make you say that this guy is a dark horse MVP. However, I think a lot of what you said is why we have him on this list, simply because we have a belief in Jim Harbaugh and what we've seen him do, turn around with Alex Smith and then Colin Kaepernick, and then even going on to Michigan and rebuilding that and finally winning the big one for them. The OC is Greg Roman, yes, we know, but Jim Harbaugh is still there. Now, like I said, the weapons, I don't even know how to describe the weapons right now on paper, because right now we're just looking at Joshua Palmer, who's probably a third or fourth receiver on most teams. Quentin Johnson, as far as I'm concerned, they should probably just convert him to tight end. And then you have the young lad, pun intended, and lad McConkey, that's there as well. So weapons, they don't look like they should be able to help this guy, but this is all on the quarterback. And if he's the quarterback that people say that he is and what they believe he is, then you're looking at an MVP. The other thing is, we have to remember Rashawn Slater, back off injury from the previous year where he only played 3 games. This year he played all 17. Then they go and draft what we think is the best tackle in the draft in Joe Alt. So he solidified at the corners. Unfortunately, Corey Lindsey, had a heart issue, and he was probably top 5 centers in the league. He had to retire, so they did replace him. But at the bookends, they're strong and solid, and they did bring in a veteran in Bradley Bozeman to the center position. So I think with the newly reformed offensive line, the mentality and coaching of Jim Harbaugh, you have to consider Justin Herbert and what he'll be able to do in this offense. Okay, everyone, hold on to your seat. For my last dark horse pick, he is the 29th favorite to win the MVP, Russell Wilson. I know you're laughing. We don't need to pause again for laughing, because you're probably still laughing from my last one in Kirk Cousins. But yes, I believe in Russ this year. And this is the way I'm going to preface it. I'll just give a preview to how I feel about the Steelers. When Russell Wilson was successful, what did he have? He had a very strong defense. He had a players coach. He had a strong running game. He gets that in coming to the Steelers. Player coach, strong defense. They fortified it, obviously, with those corners, so that defense is going to, I say, be a top 10 defense this year. And then now you get to, I talked about unlocking Drake London and Kyle Pitts. They will unlock George Pickens. And I love the pick of Roman Wilson, even though I was hating on Michigan this year. But Roman Wilson in the slot, I think, is a solid pick, and we know what Pittsburgh does when they pick wide receivers, so I believe in him as well. But George Pickens is a guy I think we're going to, you know what? Actually, siren here. Fantasy alert, George Pickens, you should be drafting him in those first 3 rounds. That's how strongly I feel about the production you're going to get from this kid this year. And I'm talking about 1,300 to 1,500 yards and 10-plus touchdowns. And I think that's what I think Russ will be able to do. They have been working on that offensive line for the past 3 years, drafting Broderick Jones, bringing in Isaac Samula, and then they drafted Troy Fautanu this year in the first round as well. So they've done a lot of work, as well as Zach Frazier. I don't want to forget him. They've done a lot of work on that offensive line. We know with the running backs and Jalen Warren, who is the scat back third down back, who's been stealing some first snaps from Najee Harris, but then you also have Najee Harris, who's your battering ram. And then they also brought in Cordero Patterson, who's a Swiss Army knife in any offense. But I think the key here is going to be Arthur Smith. Now back as an OC, he doesn't have to worry about being the head coach and taking on all of the stress of being a head coach. He can simply focus on the offense. He's got a solid quarterback. We know Justin Fields is there, but I love what I believe Russell Wilson is going to be as a constant in that quarterback room and what he's done on his resume. But I think Russ is still a capable quarterback, and on a team like this, I think he is my dark horse. And in fact, I'm actually going to take some money and put down on Russell Wilson being the MVP this year.
Yeah, Alex, we've been on opposite sides with Russell Wilson and the way we view the Steelers. If you haven't checked out the exclusive YouTube episode we did on Pittsburgh a while back, go check that out. But look, I disagree with your take so much. My last dark horse MVP is actually going to be Justin Fields. No, I'm just kidding. I'm playing around. I'm playing around. No, truth be told, Alex, and joking aside, I get the pick here because if things go right in Pittsburgh and if Russell Wilson can get back to playing, maybe not at a prime level, but even just as a Pro Bowl level, I think there's a legit shot for this to possibly happen because there's enough talent around him in Pittsburgh, like you mentioned. He's got some great weapons there. I think they have solidified the offensive line, or maybe should I say upgraded the offensive line. I think he's going to have the running game. Mike Tomlin, we know, is a gold jacket head coach, and the defense has a lot of firepower too. So when you put all that talent around a guy like this, he's not going to have to be a superstar quarterback to possibly have a really good season. If he takes care of the football and they win a lot of games this year, he could certainly find himself in that conversation. Absolutely. Did you know that Pint Glass Football is more than just this podcast? We have an exclusive newsletter. Sign up for free at pintglassfootball.com to receive articles and insights delivered straight to your inbox. But wait, there's more. We're excited to announce our brand new YouTube channel. Not only can you listen to our podcast on YouTube, but you'll also find exclusive video content waiting for you. So hit the pause button right now and go subscribe to our newsletter and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to stay connected with the latest football news and our exclusive content. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. We personally love the pick'em game. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Download the Underdog Fantasy app and sign up today with promo code PGF. That's promo code PGF to claim your special pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount. My last dark horse MVP, and if you guys have noticed the trend here, Alex and I kind of started with guys that were dark horses but had probably the best shot out of these names to potentially win the award. Our second picks were guys that were maybe a little bit darker, so to speak, guys that are a little less realistic but could do it if things broke their way. And then our last picks are guys that are, quite frankly, long shots, but they're still guys that we think could potentially pull this off. And my last one is Anthony Richardson, Indianapolis Colts quarterback. Now, look, Anthony Richardson looked like one of the most promising rookies from that 2023 NFL draft class before he got hurt. And the Colts, I think, did a really nice job drafting A.D. Mitchell in the second round this year. We had a first-round grade on this guy, top 5 wide receiver in this class. I think he comes in and instantly becomes the X receiver that they've been lacking. Pair him up with Michael Pittman Jr., who I think is a solid number 2, a solid possession guy. You've got Josh Downs. Alec Pierce, I think, is a talented player that could develop more this year. Pretty solid weapons to throw to when you really look at that group. Now, if Jonathan Taylor can stay healthy and he starts to look like the guy that we saw at the start of his career, I think this offense could really take off this year. Now, look, Richardson might not put up big passing numbers, but I think when you look at the all-purpose yards, the touchdowns, the rushing touchdowns. And if the Colts could somehow become a surprise team in the AFC, which, look, I think is possible, he could find himself in the MVP conversation.
As a resident Florida Gator fan, haven't seen Anthony Richardson all but 1 year. He should have been starting the previous year, but I digress. And in that new Billy Napier offense, started out hot and then he got cold around that 6th or 7th game because he wasn't able to consume as much of the offense as you want. Now he's had a year in the NFL, albeit he did get hurt, but he's been able to sit and, as they say, take those mental reps. I know it doesn't sound cute, it doesn't sound enticing, but he did take those mental reps. And then his mindset. One thing I can always say about Anthony Richardson, true leader, a guy that takes this very serious and a guy that wants to be a good quarterback, not just a gadget or gimmick quarterback that a lot of people have talked about him as. But if he's taking this serious, he's putting the work in the offseason. I expect him, like you said, Brad, to come back this season more prepared, more on point, and understand the offense. And like you said, the key thing here is adding A.D. Mitchell. Now, Alec Pierce, I think, may end up starting over him initially, but Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman are kind of the same receiver in a sense. It's just that Michael Pittman's a bigger receiver and a little bit more dynamic when it's for the 50-50 ball. And then Josh Downs coming in, what he did last year as a rookie with the 68 catches and I believe about 700, 800 yards and maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns. I think that he's going to be able to get better in the slot. And if A.D. Mitchell can then push Alec Pierce, now you have 4 weapons with one of those guys obviously in rotation off the bench. Those guys are going to be able to do what they need to do. That offensive line still intact, not as strong as it used to be. And if Jonathan Taylor is healthy, we know what that offensive coordinator, rather now head coach, when he has a guy like Anthony Richardson, similar to what we saw when he had Jalen Hurts, he can do some things with Anthony Richardson, who has a stronger arm, who's more dynamic. And I think, actually, we know Jonathan Taylor's a more dynamic running back than that they had with Miles in Philly. I think we can see them do a lot of different things here, a lot of different formations, a lot of motion. And once again, ring the alarm, fantasy alert. Anthony Richardson, you better get him early. You're going to be able to see that speed and his big playability if everything comes together the way that Brad has chosen this guy as a sleeper MVP pick. Hey, Brad, before we get out of here, I want to give an honorable mention. It's going to sound funny again, but Tua is a guy that I think could be in this MVP conversation. He was in it early, as was Tyreek Hill. But if he gives you another healthy season, who knows, let's contract piece aside, but if he gives you another stellar season, another full season in this offense, I can see Tua almost throwing for close to 5,000 yards in that offense, especially with a healthy Devin Achane, who he can hit on wheel routes and is going to destroy linebackers coming out of the backfield. I think he can be set up to have a huge year. And yes, I said 4,500 to 5,000 yards and close to 40 touchdowns in this offense if it's fully unleashed the way that it is, because I think they're going to be in a track meet all season long, because that defense, losing Vic Fangio, losing Christian Wilkins, Bradley Chubb coming off of injury, and unfortunately, sorry, Penn State fans, we're not big believers in Chop Robinson. They're going to be in the track meet all season, similar to what Minnesota was. What was that, 2 years ago, Brad, I believe, where they just they were first in points scored, but they were also last in points against, but they still won about 13 games. But Tua can really be set up to do some special things with that offense if he's healthy.
Yeah, and let's add to everything you said that I think there's a money motivation possibly happening here too, because we still haven't heard anything but crickets on this potential Tua deal. So he might have something to prove here, so to speak, to Miami if they want to lock him up and make him their true franchise guy going forward. This could be kind of a prove-it year for him, and I think that's an interesting dynamic to this whole thing as well. But he's been such a perfect fit in this Mike McDaniel offense. Like you mentioned, he put up big numbers last year. If he can stay healthy, and to your point about the defense, I think they are going to have to put up a lot of points, but we know they can with all the explosive playmakers on that team. I could see Tua being a big-time stat guy, and like I talked about, stats plus wins is really the formula when you're talking about MVP. Let's say Buffalo takes a step back, which is a possibility. Let's say the Jets don't come to fruition. We know New England is in a rebuild. What if Miami runs away with this division and finds themselves as one of the top seeds in the AFC? That's a possibility here. So if those things happen and it all kind of comes together here for Miami, who knows? I mean, it's an honorable mention for a reason, Alex, but I like it. I've got an honorable mention as well, Alex. I'm going to mention Matthew Stafford for the LA Rams, because this is a team that nobody seems to be really talking about. Matthew Stafford might not be in his prime anymore, but this guy can still spin it. This guy can still play. We know he's got two big-time wide receivers to throw to. We know they've got a nice running game, and he's got one of the best coaches in the game. Number 2 on our list, by the way, once again, shameless plug going back to our Top 10 Coaches podcast that was out just a little while ago. We know that this is a team that can make some noise, and no one seems to be talking about them. They've had a couple really nice draft classes back to back. They've put together this team, kind of rebuilt this team on the fly post Super Bowl. And I think the Rams are a team that maybe can make some noise. Stafford could have a big year and find himself in the conversation as well.
Yeah, what both of these guys are 14 and 15 in terms of favorite, respectively, in order on the favorite list for MVP, and Matthew Stafford has to be included. We saw what he did, especially going into the second half of that season. They started to get stronger. Puka Nacua came on. He was already being consistent, but he came on stronger as the season went on. Now you get him back with a healthy Cooper Kupp, with a healthy Tutu Atwell. And we know one thing that Sean McVay loves. He loves to be multiple with all of his receivers. So now you have all three of those guys, a lot of motion. You know that, a lot of motion, a lot of confusion there. They fortified the offensive line, bringing in Jonah Jackson from Detroit, which was one of the, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the best rated offensive line last year. One other thing that we need to talk about, Kyron Williams, which was a guy they got in the 5th round when he played 12 games, had about maybe 1,150 yards rushing, if I'm not mistaken, about 5 yards a carry. And you now add Blake Corum to that. So now you take a lot more pressure off of Matthew Stafford. And when he has time, and with those receivers in that elite route running, they're going to cause a lot of teams some issues. So I can definitely see Matthew Stafford, who has a big arm and has a lot of weapons, doing some special things there in the Rams. And let's remember, when we get to our rankings, or rather when we start breaking down divisions, circle the Rams. We're going to have a lot to say about this team.
If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.
Zencastr is the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. It provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Zencastr's post-production process takes the headache out of audio production. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. Coordinating all your guests to record in person is painful and tedious. Easily invite up to 11 participants per recording with one click. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code PGFP, and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.